Sis and I. Orphans. She's pretty. Graceful, I'm plain. Simple. Ning family came to adopt. I bowed. Grateful. Sis scoffed, begging for adoption? Don't lose dignity. They praised her integrity, took her. I ended up begging on streets. Saw her fiancé, Chin, with his mistress. Tried to warn her. She dragged me to him. Telling me secretly? Malicious. Chin lied, said I seduced him. Ordered his men to beat me to death. I screamed for Sis. She pouted, you knew he's a womanizer. You asked for it. Clubs crushed me. Body dumped in the lake. She married him. Grandly. Eyes open, I'm back. The Nings are here. Choosing. Welcome to my channel. If you like this story, please click to subscribe. There are more wonderful stories waiting for you to listen to. Chapter 1. Madam Ning is a devout Buddhist and has the greatest compassion for the poor. When I opened my eyes, my sister Rongyan was wiping mud and ash off my face. I was wearing ragged clothes she had carefully gathered. Dress up as a beggar. Lady Ning will be heartbroken when she sees you. I looked at my sister Rongyan, who frowned and lowered her head. She had snow-white skin, a delicate face, and wore elegant robes. The pain of drowning before death still lingered in my mind. In my previous life, I accidentally saved the son of the Ning family who had fallen into the water. The aunt at the Salesian orphanage said that Mrs. Ning wanted to adopt me as her daughter. At that time, Rongyan dressed me up as a beggar. She told me to tell Lady Ning all about the hardships I had endured here. I argued with her, saying that the aunt at the Salesian orphanage treated us very well and taught us to read, write, and do needlework. So how could I say such things? My sister Rongyan stroked my hand and said, you fool. If you don't say that, how will you make people feel sorry for you? Later, when Mrs. Ning arrived, I did not say what my sister had taught me. I just kowtowed and thanked Mrs. Ning for her kindness. However, my beggar's clothes made Mrs. Ning suspicious. She questioned the Salesian orphanage for taking money from the government but treating orphan girls so badly. Aunt Song from the Salesian orphanage was furious and immediately called everyone over. Everyone stood in neat rows, dressed in their best clothes. But I was covered in mud and my clothes were ragged. At that moment, Rongyan stepped forward and bowed gracefully to Mrs. Ning. My sister wanted to secure a better future for herself and took the wrong path. I apologize on her behalf. She then looked at me, who was kneeling and bowing, and said indifferently, even if you are begging for adoption, you must not lose your dignity. Your behavior is truly disgraceful. Mrs. Ning was the wife of a Hanlon scholar and had always detested cunning and scheming people. She frowned and gave me only 10 taels of silver in gratitude for saving her son. Rongyan and I were sisters who had fallen on hard times in our early years and ended up at the Salesian orphanage. In my previous life, I always believed that my sister had not done this on purpose, but had resorted to this desperate measure for fear that Mrs. Ning would take her anger out on me. As a result, I lost the opportunity to be adopted by the Ning family. That night, the Ning family's butler sent a palanquin to take my sister Rongyan away. It turned out that Grand Scholar Ning had heard about Rongyan at the Salesian orphanage and praised her for her integrity, deciding to adopt her as his daughter. When the palanquin came to pick up my sister, Aunt Song from the Salesian orphanage was standing with her hands on her hips, scolding me. Rongyu, you deliberately dressed up as a beggar. Do I not feed you enough or clothe you well enough? Our orphanage is small and cannot afford to keep someone like you. I was kicked out of the Salesian orphanage by my aunts. The orphan girls at the orphanage would learn some useful skills, and when they turned 13, they might be matched with a good family. I am not yet of age and have no one to protect me in the capital. I desperately pulled my sister Rongyan's hand and asked her what I should do. Rongyan frowned, brushed my hand away. and said, "It's better to rely on yourself than others. Have you forgotten everything I taught you?" She turned away without looking back and stepped into the carriage of the Ning mansion. Fortunately, I still had the 10 taels of silver given to me by Lady Ning. I took the silver and asked Zhou Duan, the butcher who had always looked after me, to help me rent a house in the suburbs of the capital. With 10 taels of silver, if spent carefully, I could survive for several years. I could go to the Lanchi weaving workshop, pay some money, start as an apprentice, and improve my needlework skills. Once I had mastered the craft, I could become an embroiderer and support myself. But when Zhou Dama told me everything was arranged and only the silver needed to be exchanged, my sister Rongyan arrived. She looked at me with a face as cold as ice. Rongyan clapped her hands, and her maid Chuier stepped forward, snatching the silver from my arms. I tried to protect the silver but was pushed to the ground by Chuier. Rongyan looked down at me from above. "I've always taught you that the poor shouldn't accept charity. You saved my brother's life. But how dare you rely on that favor? How dare you keep my mother's reward?" That's right. At that time, Rongyan had already become Ningyan, claiming to be the eldest daughter of the Ning family. But this was given to me by Lady Ning. I looked up and tried to defend myself. She seemed disappointed in me. "Saving someone's life is just a small favor. You're so greedy, you're bringing shame to our family." They took my silver. The butcher's wife couldn't bear to watch and begged her to spare me. Rongyan merely said indifferently, "One must have integrity. I'm just cultivating her character." Without any money, I ended up on the streets. I nearly died from being mistreated. Inside the room, Rongyan looked at the mud on my face with satisfaction. "Now, it's perfect." I snapped out of my daze and asked her with a smile, "Sister, will having my face covered in mud really please Lady Ning?" Rongyan paused, then scolded me angrily. "I'm your own sister. How could I harm you?" Seeing that I didn't say anything, she added guiltily, "Just do as I say, and Lady Ning will take pity on you." Aunt Song from the Salesian orphanage knocked on the door and said that Lady Ning had arrived and was already in the main hall. I didn't miss the flash of joy that crossed Rongyan's face. In my previous life, I had always thought that she was genuinely happy for me because I had been adopted by the Ning family. Now that I think about it, I was so stupid. I held my stomach and frowned. "Sister, you go first. My stomach hurts. I need to go to the bathroom." Rongyan looked a little suspicious. But in order to hurry to please Mrs. Ning, she just hurriedly reminded me to tell Mrs. Ning about all the hardships I had endured at the Salesian orphanage. I nodded and watched her lift the hem of her skirt, eager to leave the room. A quarter of an hour later, I went to the main hall. Madame Ning was seated at the head of the table. My sister Rongyan was pouring tea for her. Rongyan turned her head and caught sight of me. Her face flushed with panic for a moment, and the teacup in her hand nearly slipped from her grasp. This was because I had already washed my face and changed into a clean set of clothes. She took a deep breath, unable to confront me openly, and simply looked at me with a hint of reproach in her eyes. Mrs. Ning, seated at the head of the table, was beautiful and dignified. She did not take the teacup from Rongyan but rose from her seat and walked toward me. "Little you, is that you? Why are you so late?" When Ning Gongzi was saved, he asked my name and said he would come to visit and express his gratitude. I told him the truth, saying I was at the orphanage and there was no need for him to trouble himself. In my previous life, even though she mistakenly thought I had ulterior motives, Lady Ning never scolded me harshly and even rewarded me with 10 taels of silver. Thinking of this, I smiled and explained, "I accidentally stained my clothes. Since the Ning mansion is a scholarly family, I felt it would be inappropriate to meet the lady in such a state. So I went to change into clean clothes." Lady Ning did not hold my late arrival against me. but looked at me with kindness. Huaner went out to enjoy the spring scenery that day. And while admiring the lotus flowers on the lake, he accidentally slipped and fell into the water. If it weren't for your timely rescue, your father and I would never have been able to bear the responsibility. The young master of the Ning family would not have fallen into the water. He had refused to let his servants follow him and had gone to a secluded spot to admire the lotus flowers. Which is why the accident occurred. I spoke sincerely. Actually, I cannot swim either. There was a bamboo pole by the shore, so I picked it up and accidentally managed to rescue the young master of your household. Madam, please ensure that young Master Ning is more careful in the future and does not leave his attendants behind. He is an honest child. Madam Ning nodded, then furrowed her brows. How did you become so thin and small? Your sister just said you've suffered a lot. That's not true. I shook my head. Aunt Song treats us very well. She gives us new clothes every festival. And I always eat my fill at every meal. Rongyan widened her eyes. How can you believe her? She stopped mid-sentence, noticing Aunt Song approaching, and swallowed the rest of her words. Aunt Song was carrying several sets of new clothes, likely having overheard my words, and looked pleased. The lady is kind-hearted. After she sent someone to inform the orphanage the other day, I also prepared a few sets of new clothes for Ayu. Since the lady has no daughters, I feared the household might not have time to prepare in time. Madam Ning nodded. Auntie Song is thoughtful. The Ning couple were deeply in love. Madam Ning had suffered a serious injury during the birth of Ning Gongzi and had been unable to conceive again. They longed for a daughter to complete their family. In a previous life, it was Ning Gongzi who returned to report this matter, which led the Ning couple to consider adoption. Soon, Lady Ning explained her intentions, choosing her words carefully, and asked if I was willing to become her daughter. I nodded in agreement. Madam Ning repeatedly expressed her approval, warmly holding my hand, and instructed the attending maidservant to give some silver to Aunt Song, saying she would raise me well. Madam Ning held my hand as we were about to leave. Suddenly, Rongyan rushed forward and blocked Madam Ning's path. Madam Ning frowned. What are you doing? Rongyan's eyes welled up with tears. Madam Ning, please hear me out. Rongyu and I are biological sisters. We have always vowed never to part. Our mother, on her deathbed, held my hand and begged me to take good care of my younger sister. Now that my younger sister has such a promising future, as her older sister, I am truly happy for her. Deep down, I also wish to see her grow up with my own eyes, to comfort our parents' spirits in heaven. After speaking, she knelt down and bowed her head, her words sincere. Rongyan does not wish to put the lady in a difficult position, but I simply cannot bear to part with my younger sister. Even if I were to become a slave or a maid in your household, I would rather not be separated from her. She was certain that Lady Ning would not truly make her a slave or a maid. I sneered inwardly. In my previous life, when I knelt down to thank Lady Ning for her kindness, Rongyan had looked down on me with disdain. Now, wasn't she doing exactly what she had once despised? Lady Ning looked troubled. Rongyan had no life-saving debt to the Ning family's young master. Mr. Ning was a man of integrity, and Lady Ning had taken me in after consulting with him. Taking in another person without cause would likely make it difficult for her to make a decision on the spot. Xiao Yu, what do you think? Lady Ning asked me. Rongyan, seeing this, looked at me with pleading eyes. She knew that as long as she showed such a look, I would never refuse. And as long as I spoke up, Lady Ning, even if reluctant, would reluctantly agree to adopt her as well. Sister has always taught me that even when asking others to adopt you, one must never lose one's dignity. Rongyan's face paled. When did I ever say such a thing? I ignored her and bowed to Lady Ning. Sister has such noble character and enjoys tending to flowers and plants. If there is a greenhouse in the mansion, perhaps you could entrust it to her care. Lady Ning sighed in relief, finding a way out of the situation. That would be fine. Rong Yen looked at Lady Ning in disbelief, but finally replied with tears in her eyes. Yes. When we left the Silesian orphanage, Rong Yen wanted to get into the carriage with me, but was pulled down by the frowning butler Zhao. How could a maid ride with a lady? The greenhouse at the Ning residence was the place I was most familiar with in my previous life. My sister Rong Yen said that it took a lot of effort to get me this favor. At that time, I had lost my reward money and was wandering the streets, starving for 3 days. When it rained heavily in the capital, I was forced under the eaves by a drunken man who came up and tore at my clothes with a crazy look in his eyes. I cried out for help, but no one paid any attention to me. Those seeking shelter from the rain went their separate ways, and those there for the spectacle watched without a word. In the imperial city, under the emperor's feet, seeking justice was the privilege of the noble. The noble's wrong was the noble's wrong. The beggar's wrong was the beggar's misfortune. I struggled to pick up a half-broken tile and threw it with all my strength at the man's head. I don't know which wealthy family he came from, but he was injured and had sobered up a bit. Seeing the crowd pointing and whispering, he spat out, "Wait for me, you bastards," then covered his face and fled into the crowd. Rong Yen, however, walked out of the crowd with an air of superiority, her maid Chuyer following closely behind, holding an umbrella for her. I pulled on her sleeve, tears streaming down my face. "Sister, you finally came to find me." Rong Yen remained silent until I looked up and saw her furrowing her brows at the spot on her sleeve where I had grabbed it, which was stained with mud and water. My hand froze in midair before finally letting go. Glancing at the blood-stained tile in my hand, Rong Yen bit her lip in shock and exclaimed, "How could you hurt someone?" Chuyer gasped, took out a handkerchief, and carefully wiped it for her. I thought Rong Yen was worried about me, but I never expected she had come to confront me. She impatiently shook the sleeve of her robe, which couldn't be wiped clean. Chuyer looked at her in confusion. "Miss, why did you come out in the rain?" She sighed softly. "After all, Rong Yu is my younger sister." Rong Yen looked at me again, her eyes now filled with icy coldness. 3 days have passed. Rong Yu, do you know your mistake? What? I looked at her, my expression blank. The onlookers snickered, recalling the earlier scene, and began to gossip. It must be that beggar who did something wrong. That was the carriage of Ning University Scholar's mansion. The daughter he recently adopted is so beautiful. Everyone praised her for her kindness, willing to show mercy to a beggar. Rong Yen smiled slightly, making no defense, and stepped closer to me in her delicate embroidered shoes. Repeatedly unteachable. It shows how low your character is. Her personal maid looked down on me with disdain. She pretends to be righteous on the surface, but secretly keeps the reward money for herself. She acts rudely and even hurts others. Even if such a thing happened to a servant like me, I wouldn't stoop so low. I didn't understand. I took the reward money just to have a place to stay. How was that shameful? I was bullied by a lecher, and I merely defended myself. That's called rude behavior? She adopted her elder sister's authoritative tone, pouting. "I'll ask you again, do you know you're wrong?" Chuyer tilted the umbrella leaf in her hand, and rainwater trickled down the umbrella surface onto my body. My head was spinning, and my eyes were blurred by the rain. I shamefully lowered my head. I was wrong. Rong Yen spoke slowly in a low voice. "Rong Yu is still my younger sister. She made a mistake, and as her older sister, I cannot ignore it. Mother mentioned the other day that the flower house in the mansion is short-handed, and father holds those precious orchids in high esteem. She has been sent to the flower house in the Ning mansion. Afterward, I was assigned to the flower house, but Rong Yen came to find me alone in the dead of night. She fed me medicine. But when I ignored her, she wept silently beside me. Sister went to great lengths to persuade father and mother to let you stay with me. She finally arranged this job for you in the flower house. She lamented her bitter life as a dependent, saying that Chuer was sent by Lady Ning to monitor her, and every one of her actions was reported back to Lady Ning. Therefore, in front of others, she had no choice but to act that way. I understood her predicament and forced a smile to comfort her. Being able to work in the flower house is already very good. In this new life, I finally understood how easy it was to arrange for someone to work in the flower house. In the evening, Rong Yen came to find me. She looked around. The west courtyard where the Ning family had arranged for her to stay was far less luxurious than my residence in the autumn forest garden. Rong Yen entered without being invited, looked around, and couldn't help but feel envy in her eyes. She picked up the tea on my desk, drank it, and cleared her throat before scolding me first. We are sisters. How could you tell me to go work as a maid in the flower house in front of Lady Ning? I smiled. The poor should not accept charity. This is what you always say. I thought you were always so proud and wouldn't accept someone's kindness for nothing. She choked, glaring at me with disappointment. You're such a blockhead. The principle is one thing, but you must remember your own status and the bond between us sisters. Remember your place? I stood up, a mocking smile on my lips. Sister, you've spoken wrongly. My current status is that of Lady Ning's daughter, the eldest miss of the Ning mansion. Lady Ning neither adopted you nor made you my personal maid. At this hour, you shouldn't be here. Her eyes widened in shock, her fingers trembling as she pointed at my nose. You dare. I looked toward the door, where the maid Zhu Gua stood hesitating, unsure whether to enter or not. Zhu Gua, escort her back to the west courtyard. The innocent-looking young maid at the door, upon receiving the order, replied cheerfully, yes. Rong Yen was a leave by Zhu Gua, who also said that if she spoke another word, she would report her to the master and mistress and have her punished. Rong Yen had just entered the Ning mansion and did not dare to cause trouble, so she could only swallow her anger and leave with her tail between her legs. The next day, I was awakened by a loud noise outside the house. Opening the door, I saw the maidservant in the courtyard, none other than Chuer, the personal attendant of my sister Rong Yen from my previous life. Chuer stood with her hands on her hips, shouting, I've only been sick for 2 days. And now you think you can run the place? Zhu Gua was crouched on the ground, her eyes red, with bruises on her arms from being pinched. Those who were red-headed and white-capped, always seeking favor, would never change their ways. In my memory, Chuer was a capable maid by Lady Ning's side in her previous life. After Rong Yen became Miss Ning, Lady Ning assigned Chuer to her. Miss saved the young master's life. How dare that lowly maid dare to enter the Qiulin garden? This matter must be reported to the master and mistress. I remained silent. She was certain I wouldn't be angry at her words and continued. It's not that I'm saying this, but that Rong Yen, who entered the mansion with Miss, is so fox-like in appearance, she must be trouble. She flattered me with a smile. Miss's appearance is truly pure and proper. I looked at her and smiled. Some people are simply born wicked, it's just that their status has changed. And now they're trying to curry favor with me by slandering Rong Yen. Seeing that I remained silent, Chuer called in the maids waiting outside and told me that the lady had sent a hairpin and a skirt, as well as some decorative items for the inner chambers. The Ning mansion was indeed poor, those ornaments weren't luxurious, but they were elegant. I opened one of the jewelry boxes, took out a pair of jade pendants, and waved them in front of Chuer's eyes. Then I compared the pendants in my hand to her green dress. These earrings are nice. Chuer thought I was going to give them to her and smiled happily. I paused for a moment. Take them to Rong Yen and tell her I'm grateful for her hard work tending the flower house. Her face fell instantly. Why would the young miss bother with a servant? Seeing my stern expression, she reluctantly replied, "Yes. I'll make sure to pass the message exactly as you said. If you do this well, I'll ask my mother to transfer you to my brother's courtyard." Chuer was overjoyed at the news. Watching her joyful figure, I smiled to myself. The young master of the Ning mansion might not be the best place for her. The young master of the Ning mansion was kind to others, but he never allowed maidservants to attend to his personal affairs. His greatest hobby was studying historical texts and classics. In my previous life, I could never figure out this Ning Gonzi. I instructed Zhugua to handle a matter for me, then went to find my mother. After chatting for a while, Ning lady left the mansion to have tea with the wife of the left censor-in-chief. I brought back some medicine for bruises for Zhugua. Zhugua reported back to me that she had followed Chuer to the flower room. As expected, Chuer relayed my words to Rongyan exactly as I had said them. But she embellished the story, claiming that the pair of earrings were a gift from me, and she couldn't wait for everyone in the flower room to know that she had done me a favor and was highly regarded by me. The Miss Ning. Zhugua glanced at my expression and cautiously said, "Rongyan's sister accepted the jade pendant." But her expression seemed indifferent. However, she casually mentioned that Miss, you owe your current position entirely to her guidance. Seeing me silently apply the ointment to her arm, Zhugua bit her lip, wincing in pain. I chuckled inwardly. I owe my success to her. Chuer was reliable, so I told Zhugua to wait for Lady Ning to return and report that Chuer was commendable, recommending her to be sent to Mr. Ning's courtyard. Before long, I heard that there was a commotion in the flower house. It was said that Rongyan had killed a very rare and valuable orchid belonging to Mr. Ning. That orchid was supposed to be a birthday gift for the Empress Dowager next month. I took Zhugua to see the spectacle. From a distance, we saw Rongyan being held down by several rough maids, kneeling on a pile of broken porcelain shards. Ding! The manager publicly scolded her for destroying the master's precious orchid. Rongyan stubbornly defended herself. "It was you who insisted on asking me." The maids pressed down hard on her shoulders, the shards piercing her flesh, and Rongyan's face contorted in pain. "My sister won't stand by and do nothing. You dog of a servant. Dare you punish the elder sister of Miss Ning?" She had just received the earrings I had sent her through Chuer today. Thinking I was apologizing for last night's rudeness, wearing the earrings and hearing Chuer relay my message in public, she felt elated and didn't know what to do. The flower house in the mansion was always managed by Ding, the steward. The words I had Chuer convey today were misunderstood by Ding, who thought I was trying to promote Rongyan. He feared his position would be threatened. In truth, Rongyan knew nothing about cultivating flowers and plants, let alone distinguishing between different varieties of orchids. Ding had set a trap, intentionally having the maids in the flower house say that a pot of flowers was dying and asking her what to do. Rongyan saw the stone orchid and thought it was just a common plant. She blurted out a random solution, telling them to move the orchid to a larger pot, and it would survive. "That's a birthday gift for the Empress Dowager. You wouldn't have enough lives to atone for this." Ding shouted for someone to beat her, saying he would report this to the master and mistress when they returned, and have Rongyan expelled from the mansion. Glancing at me coming over with Zhugua, Rongyan's eyes lit up, and her voice carried a hint of grievance. "Sister, they're slandering me like this. I really don't know what to say." Ding the steward turned and saw me, his expression stiffening. Sweat rolled down his forehead, but he still stepped forward. "Miss Rong, this orchid is extremely valuable." With 7 or 8 pairs of eyes watching from behind, he knew he had to punish Rongyan today. If I spoke up and backed down, how could he maintain his authority in the flower house in the future? But if I spoke up for Rongyan and Ding the steward refused to back down, he would offend me. Ding the steward gritted his teeth and continued, "Miss, it's best if you don't ask about this." I nodded slightly. "Mister Ding. I am indeed ignorant about the affairs of the flower room and the mansion. You should decide for yourself. Having seen enough of this joke, I turned and left. He looked stunned, not expecting me to listen to his persuasion. As I left, I heard Mr. Ding's voice behind me rise several degrees. Beat her. Even from a distance, I could still hear Ronyan's cries. You. Are you just going to stand by and watch your own sister have her legs broken? You heartless. Ungrateful. Before she could finish, her mouth was covered, and I could only faintly hear her painful sobs. The Empress's birthday celebration was cancelled. When Mr. Ning heard about it, he felt helpless. He had always been lenient with the servants in the mansion. After weighing the situation, perhaps considering that Ronyan and I were after all sisters, he only punished her by deducting 3 months' salary. After her wounds were bandaged, Ronyan limped her way to Chiolin Garden in the cover of night to find me. Shugwa was busy organizing bookshelves. Mr. Ning invited a scholar to come to the house, saying he would also make time to teach me, and ordered his son, who already held the position of Deputy Minister of the Ministry of Rights, to attend the lessons as well. It was the Empress Dowager who had jokingly remarked that all the officials in the court were like clay figures, lacking any trace of elegance. Though the Empress Dowager was being frivolous, the Emperor was willing to indulge her, opening up some official positions in the 6 ministries for female officials. Next spring, officials of the 6th rank and above would have the opportunity to recommend women to participate in a special examination. I am now the daughter of Grand Scholar Ning. He called me to his study and imparted his wisdom, saying that one should not hesitate to recommend relatives when selecting talent. With such an opportunity, I must strive to excel. However, if I cannot even pass his test next year, I will give up. Ronyan saw Shugwa organizing books and ordered her to leave with a dismissive gesture. Shugwa looked at me, and I nodded. Soon, only Ronyan and I were left in the room. Ronyan sat down and began to complain. If you had punished that manager in front of everyone today, no one would dare to bully me anymore. I took a good look at Ronyan's current expression and almost burst out laughing. I forced myself to hold back the laughter, keeping a straight face, and responded in the tone she had used in her previous life. Ding the manager was only doing it for your own good. All you lost was 3 months' salary. But Ding the manager, who failed to nurture the prized flower, had to endure your father's wrath. Ronyan widened her eyes in anger. You saw it too. I was humiliated by a servant like that, with no dignity left. I'm your own sister. How am I supposed to face anyone if this gets out? I innocently blinked my eyes. Sister, you begged to come to the Ning mansion to be a servant, didn't you? She exclaimed in shock. You, when did you become like this? I remained silent for a moment, looking helpless. When I heard that you were being punished today, I rushed over. But you saw it yourself. As a servant in someone else's household, we're already walking on thin ice. Besides, the orchids are precious, and Ding the steward had valid reasons. I had no choice but to follow his orders. Ronyan glared at me, her face alternating between red and white. After a long standoff, she finally stormed off in a huff. In my previous life, I had been arranged by Ronyan to work in the flower house of the Ning mansion. I had a monthly allowance and food to eat. I believed this was the bright future my sister had meticulously planned for me. So I worked diligently and humbly sought guidance from others to learn the art of cultivating flowers. Everything changed when Ronyan came to the flower house to visit me. The maids in the flower house went out of their way to flatter her. We're sisters. Yet there's such a world of difference between us. The young miss is beautiful and proper. Unlike that Ronyu, she's just a dullard. I knelt on the ground with the other maids. Ronyan enjoyed the flattery but remained expressionless. Later, she dismissed all the maids, saying she wanted to speak with me privately. But she kept me kneeling for a long time. My knees ached from kneeling. And Ding, the manager, stood nearby, watching with a smug expression. She sipped her tea, glanced at Ding, and said casually, "Don't let them say such things again." Ding nodded obediently. After leaving those words, Rong Yen departed. Ding, the manager of the flower house, had been trembling with fear, afraid of offending this newly arrived young miss of the Ning family, and had instructed the maids not to mistreat me. I had assumed that Rong Yen had come to check on me because she was worried I was being bullied in the flower house. But that evening, Chui, Rong Yen's personal maid, came over and distributed silver coins as a reward to the maids. Every maid who had praised Rong Yen that day received a reward. The head servant of the flower room also benefited. From then on, they secretly speculated about their master's intentions and intensified their harassment and oppression of me, assigning me the most arduous and exhausting tasks. "Sister, you should experience this for yourself." Rong Yen was punished and seemed to have a few days of peace. 2 days later, Lady Ning received an invitation from Prince Chenping to a banquet at the Meishi Villa. And there was also an invitation for me. Currently, the Crown Prince and the Second Prince are fiercely competing for power. Your father refuses to take sides and is keeping a low profile. I originally planned to decline the invitation, but if you find it interesting, you may go and take a look. I shook my head. Chenping Wang was Rong Yan's fiancé in my previous life, and he wasn't someone easy to deal with. I told Lady Ning that I only wanted to focus on preparing for next year's imperial examination and had no interest in anything else. Lady Ning was relieved. Over the next 2 days, I felt a growing sense of unease. In the evening, while dining with Mr. Ning and Lady Ning, my right eye twitched violently. Noticing my lack of enthusiasm, Lady Ning looked at me with concern. "Is the food not to your liking? Mother, why have the meals these past 2 days been all vegetarian?" I suppressed my unease and asked curiously. Mr. Ning and Mrs. Ning stopped eating and looked at me in surprise. Mr. Ning's expression was displeased. He paused for a moment before saying, "I am pleased that you are eager to learn and improve yourself. But you must not forget the virtues of filial piety and brotherly love." Seeing that I still did not understand, Mr. Ning frowned. "Although you have now entered the Ning household, you must not forget the anniversary of your birth mother's death." A bell rang in my mind. The house had been eating vegetarian food for 3 days straight, and it was all because of an unfounded anniversary. I furrowed my brows. I don't know where my father and mother heard this news, but my biological mother passed away on March 12th. And her anniversary is still 8 months away. Madam Ning and Mr. Ning exchanged glances. Madam Ning cleared her throat. "The flower maid said yesterday that your sister." Could there be some misunderstanding? I thought to myself. Perhaps my sister remembered the date incorrectly. Before we had finished eating, someone burst into the mansion. There was a commotion outside, and the servants guarding the courtyard were too busy to report what was happening. So they followed the intruders inside and reported loudly. "Master, Lady, Prince Chenping." Before he could finish, he was kicked to the ground by a rough-looking man. I was pushed behind a screen by Lady Ning, who instructed me not to come out no matter what happened. In the hall, several people rushed in, with Chenping Wang leading the way. Mr. Ning bowed his head and asked Chenping Wang why he had come so suddenly. Chenping Wang and several generals had been drinking at an inn. After getting drunk, they demanded that the others serve as witnesses as they came to the residence of Ning University scholar to ask for the hand of a Ning family maiden. After hearing Chenping Wang's words, Mr. Ning's face darkened. This official has never had any dealings with Chenping Wang. To suddenly ask for my daughter's hand is truly incomprehensible. Chenping Wang laughed and looked at Mr. Ning. "Your Highness recently hosted a banquet at the Meishi Villa. where Miss Ning performed a dance. I was deeply moved and have come here with sincere intentions to marry her. Nonsense. Mr. Ning was clearly angered. Qin Pingwang smiled. Mr. Ning is an upright and principled man. Yet the daughter you have raised is so passionate. Mr. Ning raised his hand to interrupt him. Please show some self-restraint. Prince Qin Ping. My daughter has been raised in seclusion and has never attended any banquets in the capital. Prince Qin Ping raised an eyebrow and glanced sideways at the soft clay screen where I was hiding. He spoke with a meaningful tone, but Ning, you and I have already shared a physical relationship. The words had barely left his mouth when the room erupted into chaos. Mr. Ning's eyes widened in anger. What did you say? The generals who had accompanied Prince Qin Ping all stared in disbelief. Upon hearing this, I stepped out from behind the screen. However, my vision was blocked by someone. The person's slender figure stood before me, their voice cold and clear, spreading such nonsense to tarnish my younger sister's reputation? Are you challenging this prince to a duel? Mr. Ning? Prince Qin Ping asked with a mocking tone. I froze in place, watching my brother, who had always been so refined and aloof, roll up his sleeves and abandon all pretense of civility. I tugged at his sleeve, and he turned, his handsome face momentarily stunned, his dark eyes filled with complexity. I shook my head gently, let go of his sleeve, hurried forward, knelt before Qin Pingwang, and bowed. I am Zhu Guo, the personal maid of Miss Ning. Qin Pingwang is renowned for his charm and elegance throughout Xinjiang. However, if you have mistaken the lady, is it appropriate to tarnish my mistress's reputation in such a manner? Qin Pingwang was taken aback, smacking his lips. Zhu Guo, you're a pretty maid. Why not become your mistress's bridesmaid and enter the prince's mansion with her? He waved his hand and laughed heartily. Call your mistress out. I'll recognize her myself. Ning Lao laughed derisively. It seems Prince Qin Ping truly cannot recognize my daughter's appearance. Prince Qin Ping froze, finally realizing something was amiss. Mr. Ning beckoned me over and formally introduced me to everyone. This is my daughter, Ning Yu. The military officers who had come to the Ning mansion looked at each other. Many of them had come with Prince Qin Ping out of obligation, but there were also those who had come simply to watch the spectacle. Seeing the situation, everyone understood that Prince Qin Ping had mistaken someone. Even if this matter were brought before the emperor, Prince Qin Ping would be in the wrong. While the commotion was happening outside, my mind was as clear as a mirror. I pulled Zhu Guo aside and had her change into her clothes. Madame Ning took over, her voice gentle. Please forgive us for causing you all this trouble. Ning Yu has not left the mansion in the past few days. How could she have attended any banquet? The crowd looked pensive, some still confused. Qin Pingwang had spoken so firmly, and the woman had indeed gone to the banquet with the invitation sent by Qin Pingwang to the Ning mansion. If it wasn't a Ning family maiden, then who was it? At that moment, Zhu Guo emerged from behind the screen, timidly saying, "It must be the woman from the flower room." Madame Ning immediately understood. The day before, Rong Yan had come to see her, claiming she wanted to leave the mansion to pay respects to our biological mother. Madame Ning kindly gave her some silver, saying she could also pay her respects on her way. Rong Yan had stolen the banquet invitation and gone to the Meishi villa. At the banquet, she performed a dance. The guests only heard that Grand Scholar Ning had recently adopted a daughter and treated her as his own. No one in the capital had ever seen me, so everyone believed that Rong Yan was Ning University scholar's daughter. Everything was exactly the same as in my previous life. In my memories, in my previous life, Rong Yan was the adopted daughter of the Ning family. Qin Pingwang also sent an invitation to the banquet, but Rong Yan insisted on attending Qin Pingwang's banquet. At the banquet, she was praised by Qin Pingwang. Your dance captivates the city. Rumors spread throughout the capital that the daughter of Grand Scholar Ning and Prince Chenping had fallen deeply in love at the banquet and had pledged their lives to each other. However, Grand Scholar Ning opposed the marriage. Rong Yan knelt at the main gate of the mansion, pleading desperately, "Daughter truly loves Prince Chenping." Later, Mr. Ning relented. The emperor most feared close ties between military generals and civil officials in the court. Chenping Wang was part of the second prince's faction, and many young officials who had once studied under Mr. Ning were now in the court. Mr. Ning refused to take sides lightly, and many civil officials were watching and waiting. Chenping Wang was confident that as long as he could control Mr. Ning, the second prince would have the support of the entire court. Chenping Wang had his own calculations, and Rong Yan had come to him willingly. How could he refuse? When everyone approached, Rong Yan was watering the flowers. It wasn't until they drew near that she seemed to notice them. Slowly lifting her head from the flowers, a single autumn hibiscus blossom rested on her cheek, as delicate as a flower reflecting in water. Everyone was momentarily speechless. Rong Yan saw Chenping Wang and couldn't hide her excitement. Blushing suddenly, "Your Highness." Chenping Wang's expression softened slightly. Mr. Ning stroked his beard. "So, Chenping Wang has set his sights on the maid in my household. Your Highness, if you want a maid, just ask for her directly. Why involve others?" This remark hit Chenping Wang where it hurt. He snapped back. "Let's discuss this matter later. Your Highness." As Chenping Wang turned to leave, he heard Rong Yan's heart-wrenching cry from behind him, "Your Highness, you swore an oath under the moonlight with Rong Yan. Have you completely forgotten? Rong Yan is the daughter of an honorable family. How can you treat me this way?" She knelt down with a thud, tears welling up in her eyes, looking pitiful and helpless. Chenping Wang's face darkened, but he couldn't lose his composure in front of everyone. After all, he had publicly admitted to having physical intimacy with the woman who had attended the banquet that day. "I will give you a proper resolution." Chenping Wang clenched his teeth and forced out those words before storming off. The generals who had followed him to the Ning mansion also looked embarrassed and hurriedly apologized to Mr. Ning. A maid from the flower room had impersonated a Ning mansion lady and climbed into Prince Chenping's bed. The esteemed Prince Chenping had been toyed with by a mere flower room maid. This was truly a fascinating spectacle. The farce finally came to an end. I knew that with Rong Yan alone, she could never have stolen the invitation. Zhu Gui had gone to inquire, and Chuer had only gone to Ning Gongzi's courtyard that night. She was expelled from the courtyard that very night for improper behavior. He did not explicitly state what had happened, but Chuer was assigned to the outer courtyard to do menial chores. Chuer harbored a deep grudge against me, convinced that I had sent her there, causing her such humiliation. This is why she colluded with Rong Yan to steal the invitation. She had once been a trusted maid under Lady Ning, so it was easy for her to enter the main courtyard and steal two unused invitations. After all, if Rong Yan could climb her way up to the prince, she too could rise to prominence. I suddenly recalled a vague memory from my previous life and discussed it with my mother, deciding to keep it under wraps for now. Chuer waited for several days without any punishment, thinking the matter had not been discovered yet, and grew arrogant. After the incident, Rong Yan began slacking off in the flower house and refused to work anymore. Ding! The manager scolded her, but she pouted and retorted, "I am the future mistress of the prince's mansion. How can I do such menial work?" The servants in the mansion fawned over her, teasing her about becoming the future princess. After all, Prince Chenping had publicly declared that he would give Rong Yan a proper life. Time passed quickly, and Ning Gongzi followed his father's wishes and studied with me. He often tested me on behalf of his father. Whenever I answered confidently, he looked at me with approval and said, "Ah, you is truly quick to understand." I smiled and shook my head. I knew I was not as intelligent as he made me out to be. It was just that these poems and classics were something I had studied diligently in my previous life. At that time, Rongyan used the excuse of sisterly affection to ask me to finish the tasks in the flower room so she could accompany her to listen to the master's lectures. I cherished this opportunity and would rise before dawn each day, finishing the tasks assigned to me by Ding the steward early. Also, I could listen and learn more. One day, the master praised Rongyan a bit more. Rongyan returned to her room and slammed her book chest shut, the sharp corner hitting my ankle. The pain made tears well up in my eyes. She turned away, pretending not to notice, but seemed still angry, and threw the teacup to the ground. Father is truly senile. Why make me read books? Being a female official is so easy. Those noble ladies have been studying since childhood. I, who started so late, no matter how hard I study, can never compare to them. Rongyan found studying bitter, so she ordered the kitchen to prepare different snacks for her every day, while I swept and carried water in the flower room. I also had to accompany her in her studies, doing 2 jobs at once. Yet I could only earn the monthly allowance from the flower room, for she said it was a sign of sisterly affection and that she wanted to spend more time with me. In the evening, I sat under the corridor outside the flower room, using a branch dipped in water from a wooden bucket to review what the teacher had taught the previous day. Just then, Ning Gongzi passed by. He noticed the water stains on the ground and raised the corners of his lips. Without a word, he picked up another branch, circled my mistakes one by one, and wrote the correct answers beside them. His gaze swept over the water stains on the ground, and he praised me for my diligence. However, this scene was witnessed by Chuer, who secretly told Rongyan. Later, Rongyan no longer allowed me to accompany her to study, but I still insisted on going. Every day, Rongyan filled several food boxes with osmanthus pastries, 8 treasure cakes, and various other delicacies from the small kitchen. She instructed me, these are things meant to be eaten. Even if they're in the food boxes, they must not be placed on the ground, or they'll be tainted with bad luck. Ning Gongzi merely asked casually from the hall, why didn't you call your younger sister in to listen to the lesson with us? Rongyan seemed deeply insulted, retorting, there are strict distinctions of rank. Someone of her lowly birth is unworthy to listen in with her elder brother and me. I stood under the blazing sun, carrying the heavy food boxes. But from that day onward, the window of the main hall was always left ajar. The master's voice could be heard clearly from outside. I knew who was responsible and felt deeply grateful. Rongyan waited impatiently for a long time, but Qin Ping Wang remained silent. The maids in the flower room, who had once flattered her, now spoke to her with sarcasm. The future princess. Hurry up and water the flowers. She finally grew anxious and went to beg Lady Ning to intervene on her behalf. Lady Ning was furious about the scandal within the mansion, but out of consideration for Rongyan, who was my older sister, she personally visited Lady Chen's residence. However, Prince Qinping had always been infatuated with Lady Ning's status as the daughter of a noble family. How could he possibly marry a servant as his princess? Later, after Lady Chen spoke up, Prince Qinping relented and agreed to let Rongyan enter the prince's mansion as a concubine. In the first month of the lunar calendar, a palanquin from the prince's mansion entered the gates of the Ning mansion. Before getting into the palanquin, Rongyan insisted on seeing me. She wore a deep red wedding gown and came to the autumn forest garden. Rongyan sat on a low stool inside the house. Seeing me still studying, she looked at me with disdain. A prince's concubine is far more prestigious than the daughter of a poor scholar. Sister, don't you agree? I didn't even lift my head. Then I wish you a bright future. She didn't know which word in my sentence had hurt her, so she snatched the book from my hands and tore it to pieces in front of me. I looked up at her, my eyes betraying a hint of pity. She was about to enter the grave. I wouldn't bother with a dying person. Seeing that I didn't say a word, she grew even more arrogant. Does the Ning family really give you such respect? No matter how she provoked me, I responded with a smile. She angrily said, "In the future, we'll go our separate ways. You and I are no longer sisters. My future glory will have nothing to do with you." It was rare for her to speak her mind, so I nodded. As you wish. As the year drew to a close, it coincided with the birthday of the imperial concubine. Everyone in the capital knew that the emperor favored her greatly, so a palace banquet was held, and high-ranking officials were permitted to bring their female relatives to celebrate. In my previous life, Mr. Ning, an upright official, couldn't afford an extravagant gift, so he decided to present his treasured orchid as a token of his respect. However, on the eve of the concubine's birthday banquet, the orchid vanished. The incident occurred suddenly, and the first person to be held accountable was Mr. Ding, the manager. The maids in the flower house were all on edge. Chuer stepped forward and publicly accused me of stealing the orchid from the flower house and taking it out of the palace. The seller, the gatekeeper of the mansion, and I were brought before the three courts for a confrontation. They had bribed someone, and all the evidence pointed to me. Madame Ning still remembered the favor I had done for the young master of the Ning mansion, but she said that someone of my character was unsuitable to remain in the Ning mansion and expelled me from the estate. I thus ended up on the streets. In the cold winter, I contracted consumption, and no one would hire a consumptive beggar. After a few days, I heard that the Ning mansion had been raided and its members executed. My sister Rongyan, however, was spared thanks to Qin Pingwang's guarantee. An old beggar I knew overheard the conversations of the powerful officials drinking at the Noni Pavilion. At the birthday banquet for the Empress, Ning University scholar presented a gift of orchids he had painted himself. Qin Pingwang said he wanted to examine it closely, but the eunuch unfolding the scroll trembled, and an old letter fell out. That letter was written by a traitor who had betrayed the country 3 years earlier. The reason why that traitor was exposed in the first place was because Grand Secretary Ning was the first to discover the plot. Unable to persuade him, he was heartbroken and decided to report him to the emperor. However, Grand Secretary Ning still kept the letter written by the traitor, which hinted through poetry that a good bird should choose a good tree to nest in. The emperor was furious. Prince Chenping added fuel to the fire by saying that the traitor and Grand Secretary Ning had once been close friends. The Empress Dowager refused to believe it and gently persuaded the emperor, saying that since it was Grand Secretary Ning who had exposed the traitor, he must not have had any disloyal intentions. The emperor hated those who sought to collude with foreign countries, and he refused to believe her. Grand Scholar Ning had no way to explain himself. He could not bear to destroy his old friend's belongings, but he had indeed deceived the emperor. After the palace banquet, everyone in the Ning mansion was arrested and sentenced to execution in the fall. Rong Yan went to buy cosmetics and encountered me begging on the street. At that time, Chuer was still by her side. Seeing my disheveled appearance and unstoppable coughing, she teared up and cried, saying she was acting against her will, forced by others. She had been searching for me for days and even prepared 100 taels of silver for my medical treatment. At that time, I was already gravely ill and refused to believe her, feeling only disappointment toward her. But out of pity for someone on the brink of death, I sighed and told her what I had seen a few days earlier. Qin Pingwang's concubine is pregnant, and he is unworthy of being a good husband. You should take care of yourself. I meant well, but she grabbed me and insisted that I tell Qin Pingwang in person. He may have done wrong, but you told me in secret. That's truly malicious. When the time came, Qin Pingwang turned the tables, accusing me of trying to seduce him, and ordered his men to beat me to death with clubs. Knowing I was about to die, I didn't want to suffer in agony, so I cried out to Rongyan, "Save me!" She pouted. You knew he was a womanizer. Yet you still went to him. What else could it be but self-abasement? I was beaten to death with clubs. And my body was thrown into the lake. Rong Yan, however, reconciled with Chen Pingwang and married him in a grand ceremony. As I lay dying, I heard her voice. Soft and sweet, I have reunited with the prince. Just like lovers meeting for the first time on a wall or a horse. And I will not allow myself to be so deeply in love. Memories of my past life flashed through my mind. And I noticed some details I had overlooked before. Chen Pingwang had relented in front of Lady Chen and agreed to let Rong Yan enter the prince's mansion as a concubine. But he never sent anyone to fetch her. Yet he suddenly took her in during the first month of the lunar year. Zhu Gui told me. The people we sent back reported that, according to their observations over the past few days, Rong Yan gave Chuer a large sum of silver, instructing her to go to the prince's mansion to seek an audience with the prince. However, she was driven out by the guards. Later, Chuer used the silver to slip a note inside, and the steward of Prince Jinping's mansion personally came out to escort Chuer inside. Chuer had once been a trusted servant of Lady Ning. If that treasonous letter indeed existed, Chuer, who had served Lady Ning for so long, might have already known about it. Could it be that she was the one who informed Rong Yan about this matter from her previous life? Otherwise, why would Prince Jinping be willing to protect her after the Ning mansion was raided and its members executed, leaving Rong Yan suddenly without the support of her maternal family? The Empress's birthday banquet arrived as scheduled. In this life, that pot of stone orchid had already been destroyed by Ding the steward through Rong Yan's hands. When I entered the palace with Lord Ning and Lady Ning, I happened to encounter Rong Yan, who had been left outside the palace gates by Prince Jinping. Her gaze toward the people of the Ning mansion was poisonous. Yet she couldn't hide her triumph. I stepped down from the carriage. I heard Rong Yan shout from behind me. Rong Yu, good and evil will eventually be repaid. Have you considered what will become of you for treating me this way? I ignored her and helped Lady Ning into the palace. At the palace banquet, it was time for everyone to present their gifts. As expected, Lord Ning presented the Empress consort with a painting of orchids, praising her for her graceful demeanor and noble character. Chen Pingwang, emboldened by alcohol, demanded to examine it closely. The young eunuch holding the scroll trembled, but nothing fell out. Chen Pingwang immediately tore the scroll apart, claiming there was something amiss. Yet, even after turning the painting upside down, he found nothing. He muttered, "It's impossible," seeing the emperor's displeased expression. Prince Jinping hurriedly apologized, claiming he had drunk too much and acted rashly. Lady Ning gripped my hand tightly, and I looked at her reassuringly. Lord Ning seemed to have understood as well. I knew that last night I had burned the painting meant as a gift, which had displeased Lord Ning. They all thought I had gone mad. But I calmly apologized, "Please have my father create another one." The emperor was furious. In front of the ministers and the empresses, he harshly reprimanded Chen Pingwang for ruining the empress's mood, and punished him by halving his salary for half a year. Outside the palace gates, Rong Yan waited anxiously, until she saw Chen Pingwang emerge from the gates in a rage. She was about to approach him when he suddenly pushed her to the ground with a single palm strike. Rong Yan was confused. Her eyes filled with mist. Chen Pingwang showed no mercy, glaring at her fiercely. "You're as stupid as a pig." The prince's carriage drove away, leaving Rong Yan behind. She finally abandoned all dignity, sobbing and chasing after the carriage, shouting, "Prince, I'm innocent." Upon returning to the mansion, Lady Ning decided to sell Chuer into slavery. This winter month, Rong Yan's letters were delivered one after another to the Ning mansion, clearly marked for me. In my spare time, to ease my mind, I opened and read a couple of them. Every word was her heartfelt regret and vow to reform. Of course, there were also details about how Chen Pingwang had married Shui Shi's daughter, how the main wife, Chui sure envied her beauty and oppressed her at every turn. And how she begged me to save her. I gathered them all and had Zhuge burn them in the charcoal brazier. At least to keep warm. Winter passed and spring arrived. When I saw Rongyan again, it was because the Empress Dowager had summoned me. Outside the palace gates, there was someone suspicious lurking around, following my carriage. As soon as I stepped down from the carriage, I saw a pair of blood-stained hands grabbing my skirt. I was startled. The owner of those hands had her face slashed beyond recognition, her clothes in tatters, looking like a madwoman. Save me. I'm your older sister. Her voice was hoarse. I furrowed my brows. Rongyan? In the distance, a noble woman approached, fanning herself with a round fan. I raised my eyes and smiled. Miss Chui? No. You should now be addressed as Princess Consort Chenping. She did not respond, glancing at Rongyan, who was hiding behind me in panic. Does Miss Ning also meddle in the affairs of my prince's mansion? Rongyan clutched my sleeve tightly. She is my own sister. How can I not help her? Chenping Wangfei sneered and ordered the maidservant behind her. Nonsense. Slap her. I noticed Rongyan trembling beside me. I whispered. Stop. Rongyan sighed in relief, looking at me with tears in her eyes, filled with hope. Chenping Wangfei looked at me in confusion. I forced a smile. The palace gates are right ahead. If you must punish her, do it there. Thank you for reminding me. Miss Ning. Princess Chenping smiled faintly. Rongyan, hearing my words, stared at me in disbelief, her eyes widening in shock. Rongyu. How could I have such a heartless sister? She could barely stand and collapsed to the ground. I bent down. Have we not already severed our sisterly bonds? She grabbed my sleeve. Good sister. I was wrong. I truly know I was wrong. Please. Save your elder sister. Let go. She refused to let go. I raised my hand, pulled out the golden hairpin from my hair, and swiftly stabbed it into her left palm, which was pressed against the ground. Rongyan's face contorted in agony, and she let out a piercing scream. I leaned down and whispered, I didn't take your life. I'm not forgiving you. I just know that every day you live will be more painful than death. Chenping Wang's consort waved her hand, signaling for someone to drag her away. Truly, karma is inescapable. Rongyan would never know that it was I who had helped the Chui family and become the driving force behind her becoming Chenping Wang's legitimate wife. The Chui family had been engaged to Chenping Wang in the past, but the eldest daughter of the Chui family who was supposed to become his concubine had died. Over the years, the Chui family had fallen into decline, and the second daughter of the Chui family had been obsessed with marrying Chenping Wang. But he had never mentioned the engagement, treating it as a joke made by his elders. In my previous life, Chenping Wang feared she might cause trouble, so he kept her and Rongyan hanging on with sweet words. The so-called pregnant concubine I saw on the streets was also the second daughter of the Chui family. After the palace banquet, I had Zhuge deliver a message to the Chui family's second daughter. Zhuge went, and the next day, the second Miss Chui entered the palace under the pretext of having dreamed of her sister and wanting to catch up with the Empress Dowager who had been close to the eldest daughter of the Chui family when she was alive. The Empress Dowager loved the fragrant pears from Yongzhou and particularly favored goose meat, which greatly damaged her spleen and stomach, leaving her weak. It would take at least 10 days before the imperial physician could diagnose the cause. The noble concubine invited Miss Chui to dine with her. After Miss Chui kindly reminded her, she immediately asked the imperial physician and learned that the roasted goose should not be eaten with fragrant pears. The noble concubine was deeply moved by Miss Chui's kindness. The next day, the emperor issued an edict, bestowing a marriage between Prince Chenping and the daughter of the Chui family. I was about to enter the palace gates, but I was called to a halt. Another carriage slowly came to a stop before the palace gates. A hand with well-defined muscles parted the silk curtain. Inside the carriage, Ning Gongzi furrowed his brows and handed me a handkerchief. After all, you are about to pay respects to the Empress Dowager. You must mind your manners. I did not take it but smiled and asked him, "Does my elder brother feel disappointed seeing me like this?" He paused for a moment. A gentleman does not stand under a crumbling wall. You can protect yourself, I only feel relieved. I replied lightly, "Thank you, elder brother," and turned to leave. Ning Hui called me back again. He lowered his eyes and whispered, "Ah, you. I'll wait for you here." I turned to look at him, feeling a bit dazed. Behind those calm black eyes, did he hide the same heart-pounding, unknown emotions as I did? In this life and the last, I may have once felt something for him, but I knew that perhaps Rongyu could. But Ning Yu could not. I had a path I wanted to follow more, and I did not dare to gamble with this unexpected calamity and hardship. I smiled at him. "Brother, you don't have to wait for me. The Empress will send someone to escort me out of the palace." Without waiting for his response, I turned around without hesitation. Being a female official was my choice. I was already Ning Hang's sister in name, and my father and mother loved me as if I were their own daughter. No matter what lies behind those eyes, it is ultimately unacceptable to the world. One must not be too greedy. I have someone I care about, and I have something I want to protect. In the imperial garden, the Empress consort raised her hand to smell the peonies. Her expression meaningful. I was just on the city wall looking out into the distance. Ning Gongzi's carriage has not left for a long time. My heart trembled, but I remained composed on the surface. Brother and sister's affection, the entire Ning household has always treated this official well. That's right. I am now a female official in the Ministry of Rights. Does the Empress Dowager regret it? I gazed at the flowers vying for beauty in the imperial garden and suddenly spoke. The Empress Dowager's words seemed playful, yet they had opened a path for women to hold official positions throughout the realm. Regret what? Regret becoming a woman confined to the palace? The Empress Dowager scoffed. Her attendant gently scolded her. "Your Excellency, be careful with your words." The Empress Dowager waved her hand and suddenly smiled. "I have regrets, but I do not regret my choice." She looked at the flowers in the garden, her gaze firm. "When I chose to become the emperor's concubine and enjoy the wealth of the imperial family, it was my own willing choice. One should not yearn for something else once they have achieved something, for that leads to restlessness. Only then can one find peace." "Yes," I said thoughtfully, grateful for her words, and marveling at the Empress's wise heart. She reached out and plucked a flower from the imperial garden, pinning it in my hair. It was a peony flower. It symbolized steady advancement. The Empress consort smiled and said she was tired, and would rest in the warm pavilion. Before leaving, she looked at me with satisfaction and smiled. "The imperial garden is picturesque. Ning Qing, why not stay and admire the flowers before returning to the palace?" The Empress Dowager's gaze swept over the opulent surroundings, and she spoke softly. "It is easy to recognize the face of the east wind. In the future, Ning Qing, your path is still long." I glanced sideways and saw the Empress Dowager's figure growing distant. Turning back, the garden was filled with vibrant flowers and fragrant blossoms. Yes, I still have a long, long path ahead of me. And